Hi, Tova.
Hello.
Okay, so we are technically live, but I am going to do a quick intro right now, okay?
Sounds good.
Thanks. Parenting in the age of AI can make adults feel like they need to become technologists overnight, but the deeper challenge may be emotional, not technical. Dr. Tova Klein, author of Raising Resilience and a longtime expert in early childhood development, helps parents understand what children actually need in uncertain times. Her work reminds us that resilience is not toughness or achievement. It is built slowly through relationship, repair, boundaries, and trust. In a world of instant answers and endless stimulation, children need adults who can help them be bored, frustrated, curious, wrong, and loved. In other words, some of the oldest parenting technologies may be the ones we need most right now. Dr. Tova Klein, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and we were earlier backstage just talking about how fabulous your earrings are.
Thank you.
That's all that matters in the end,
That's
right?
all that matters. The Ann
That's
Arbor
right.
Art Fair many years back.
Oh, wow, look at
Yeah.
you. So Tova, I had such a good first question for you. Now I can't find it. Okay, I'm going to keep it broad first. Tova, what does resilience today look like in children?
So I'm going to tell you what it looks like today, but what it's always looked like. That's the funny thing about children. They don't change in the ways that we think they change. The world changes, our context changes, stress changes. So what resilience means for children, for teens across ages, is that ability to face the hard stuff. So to adapt, to adjust, to pivot, to be flexible in the face of hardship, whether that's small hardship, medium, or kind of the big bad things that happen. So it's really this flexibility or ability to shift directions and to know they're not alone. Particularly the younger they are, the more so, but even as children grow up and become teenagers and into young adulthood. So it's really all of that pivoting, adjusting, the ability to face hurdles in life.
I'm sort of smirking, Tova, because I just don't know if I can say I know a huge amount of adults
Yeah.
who I feel like can embrace
Yeah.
some of those priorities, behaviors, skill sets. Certainly, the people who have faced the most adversity in their lives seem to be the adults that I feel like can embody
Mhm.
flexibility, openness, curiosity, humility, stamina when the going gets rough.
Mhm. But so here's the thing. We are preparing our children to become adults one day, right? We all want them to become adults and to become, in some way, decent adults, however you want to define that. And in order to do that, they're going to be facing not just adversity. I think when we think adversity, we think like, oh, you have to have grown up with terrible hardship and maybe even abuse or hardcore poverty and all these bad things. That does happen to people, and that's not healthy for children. And some get strength and some don't. So I'm not recommending it. But every single day, your children are facing things that they don't like, for younger children, they get to school and their friend's not there.
Yep.
Or, if you have, depending on the age of your child, that third grade, they go to school and the teacher's out and it's a substitute, they're losing their mind. So do middle schoolers, by the way. Like this teacher wasn't out, we acted up. So any change you could call, I'm going to put in quotes, hardship. But then there's the like mid-level, like I'm really struggling with this set of math problems or learning to read or how to write this first essay. And then there's the rejections, friends who don't want to play with you, but also I tried out for the school play and I didn't get the lead part that I had wanted for years. And then they were finally in eighth grade doing that play and I didn't get the lead part. Those are all you can call hardships or hurdles or adversities. So when I think of adversity, I think of it as a continuum. and that it's every single day children face disappointment or hardship. We might not think it's hardship that we're out of peanut butter and our 4-year-old wants peanut butter, but they think it's hardship. So it's almost like we're handed the opportunity, even if children have a really good life and you think they're even spoiled or they've got so much already, what more could they want? Every day they're facing disappointment. And the question is, can you help them through it, not run circles around to make them the dinner they thought they were having, but to say, yeah, you thought one thing and another thing is happening. So all of that prepares them to handle bigger and bigger disappointments through life.
I appreciate your note I appreciate you framing that resilience today doesn't look different than resilience 775 years ago. And I do think that there is this new algorithm that parents step into when it comes to raising their kids today that feels more complicated than it used to be. Dare I say, we take ourselves far too seriously for this project. I'm the oldest of 25 grandchildren. My eldest is 10. All of my younger cousins are starting to have babies, and there is such a spectrum of how they all are stepping into their role as caretakers, which is either I'm inventing parenthood myself from the very, very beginning.
Because
I have to,
nobody's ever been a parent
because no
before.
one's ever done it. No one can articulate how much I love my kid, nor be able to identify the best ingredients that are supposed to be in their food. And then there's the ones that are a little bit more, and they're fighting to be, I don't know if the right word is relaxed or inviting of the rest of the community into their children's lives. But I am more stressed for parents today than I think my parents were for their peers and for me. And I fear that it has to do with the algorithm and what the algorithm is telling my younger cousins about how they're supposed to raise their kids. There's more comparison culture. But even there's just like these random benchmarks that are suddenly being thrown out from used to be what, like, eating, talking, reading, writing, arithmetic, shaking hands, like buckling your seatbelt without having to be reminded 25 times, not losing your mind when your sister takes the remote control, like these random, but now there's like 2,900 benchmarks. And so I recognize that resilience is just stamina and a species surviving. And I also think parents have it harder today.
Right. Harder and easier. That's the irony.
Okay.
Right. So for many parents, not all, but many parents are leading a life that has many more options in a good way. Like, I may have a choice of where I live. All those places are getting so expensive, maybe our choices are being curtailed again. We make choices for ourselves, for our children. I'm going to move to the next neighborhood if I have that luxury of being able to, because the schools are better there. There are many more options, but the problem with choices and information is I think it truly becomes a tyranny. It's like the tyranny of choice, the tyranny of information. And so what happens is it undermines us, right? It's like, oh, I thought I had the right idea, or I thought I knew what to do, but then I read this and I read that, and the pediatrician said something, and my neighbor said something, and my friend said something, and my mother-in-law. Whoops. It's just like so much input that it actually undermines, what do I want? What does my gut tell me? Now, it may be for a parent that they don't have a good compass. Maybe your childhood was really rough and even toxic, or there are parts of it that you're like, I never want to repeat that part. And then you have to think about, and this is part of my book, Raising Resilience, what do you bring from childhood? So some of it is, there it is, Raising Resilience, right? What do you bring from childhood? Hopefully some of it is good. Some of it usually is not good. And some of it was missing. Like, we had it was bad, but my parents worked a couple of jobs and there was love. But some people really don't have like what I would call a parenting compass. They say, well, I cannot do what my mother or my father or my step-parent did. I just can't. So that's one, is like, who do you draw on? Whose voice supports you? And hopefully there is somebody. But we're also bombarded with information as if there's only one right way to raise a child.
Right.
And I think therein lies some of the problem. I mean, I was hesitant. My first book is How Toddlers Thrive. I was so hesitant to write it. People were coming to me saying, whether it was in the publishing world, editors or psychologists or parents were like, please write a book that gets your word out. And I was like, I don't want to put more information out there, until I realized, wait, I could put information that hopefully would relax parents to say, understand their world a little bit. Of that book's for very young children. And then it'll be funnier actually and lighter. And then Raising Resilience comes really on the cusp of the world is really moving quickly, shall we call it, right? Changing. There's a lot of information in it. So what do we do to figure out the grounding? And then I can look at the science. I can look at years of clinical experience. There's a huge body of literature that can actually guide us that says children need basics. And that's why you can say, well, what is resilience? But also, what is it that children need? Humans need some very basic things. I mean, we are mammals, for better and worse. We're mammals, right? And the kind of watering that children need doesn't actually change that much. So children need love. They need somebody who says, I've got you. And it doesn't have to be a parent. It might be a grandparent. It might be a relative who helped raise you or who is raising you. But they need an adult in their life who literally messages them with their little twinkle in their eye or their cue of like, I got ya. Yeah, you might be different than other kids, but you're good. And so some version of that, and then also some limits and boundaries, what we call routines or schedules or bedtimes at 8:30 is really, it's like a guardrail. We go to bed at 8:30. Why? Because we do that every night. And the parents or the adults know that children need sleep and you don't discuss it.
Right.
You have a routine. There's books or there's this or there's a little discussion. If your child's older, you might lay down and listen to their worries. But it's those routines and that kind of limits on their everyday life that helps children then feel like, oh, somebody's guiding me a little bit. And then I have some room to choose. I'm going to sleep with this pillow or that pillow is their choice. But it's not up to them to go to sleep. Right? It's like,
right. Right. There's like false choice in the framework. And it's not, it's like there's choice in the frameworks that
genuine, but
you're
it's
offering.
yeah,
Correct.
it's a genuine, you want to wear those pajamas, more power to you. I'll help you get them on. But bedtime is bedtime.
Right.
Because for many children, not all, for many, if you said go to sleep whenever you want, and I see this in families, and the children are exhausted. Because who would go to sleep if everybody else is up and listening to music and putting dishes in the dishwasher and whatever else the busy family's doing? So we give them this sense of, I'm here for you. I'm going to structure the day. School does that. We do send them to school. Why? It's compulsory. And if you're homeschooling them, you have to have a routine still, right? And so all of that actually helps establish a sense of safety in children. And that sense of safety is part of becoming resilient. You can't handle life if you're vigilant because you're worried about
You're unclear about what's next.
what's next. Am I going to be fed? Am I okay here? Am I safe? If you're always looking behind your shoulder, it's very hard to learn anything because you got to keep yourself safe. But when adults are like, we got this, you don't have to love school, but you go in and you know, like every day, reading is the first thing, you do it or some version of it.
Tova, in your book, Raising Resilience, you talk about parents continuing to emphasize the idea that they are bearing witness to their kids, this idea of, I got you, the idea that we're in this together, setting boundaries, not for boundaries' sake, but just so that there's some outstanding questions that kids don't have to mull over, like who's picking me up from school, what time is bedtime, where am I going to sleep? And while there might be a lot of flexibility in pajama choice or which pillow or whether or not they're going to have carrots or broccoli, that there's still a framework of safety. And I'm wondering, particularly in this age of AI, when kids can get instant answers and instant reassurance about outstanding questions or where their place is in the world, what kind of uncertainty do you think parents still need to protect? This idea of, I'm not sure, that's unclear, let's find
Mhm.
out. How do you think parents should be able to hold both the
So,
framework of certainty and uncertainty in today's AI world?
yeah. So look, the world is always changing. I think we also forget that. Like AI is this thing now. But I am in that camp of we've always handled change. Like I'm not Pollyanna-ish, but we've always handled change as humans and as parents. So I think part of it is even before AI, although AI has been talked about for a long time, but before it got here, let's say before right now in your beautiful podcast, like it's been coming. But before that, what was the big switch? A phone that you could hold in your hand and Googling things. Not to be an advertisement, but however you want to say, you could search for answers. And so for how long is it now? Over a decade. I don't know when the iPhone came in, like 2015.
Let's just pretend, for argument's sake, everybody feels like their life has sort of always had it, at
Yeah,
least the past like 10,
exactly.
20
Because if you're
years.
raising children today, you've always had it, right?
Yeah, close
It-
enough, close enough.
So you can think about it this way. The child asks a question. Is it that they want an answer to the question? And then it's like, pick up your phone and Google it. Or is it an interactive process? And I see AI in this same thing, that it's the onus is always on the parents. Sorry to say to any parent listening, because it's always on us. But it's like, huh? And can you sit in that sort of unknowing, right? I don't really know what kind of animal does that thing. Or I don't know the last time this team won a championship or who that player was. How are we going to figure that out? And when we have those discussions with children, they're actually really excited. They want to be with the parent. And that's true even as kids get older. But the onus is on parents because one is what's our use of our phones and iPads and AI, and what limits are we going to put on children? So,
Tova, can I offer a really interesting example that
yeah,
I'm
please.
uncomfortable with? Um, my husband is in youth sports, which should be its own. I'm putting a pin in it. I recognize that should be its own separate, not just episode, but podcast series. But as a consequence, sports, professional sports, youth sports, sports in general is discussed a lot in our home.
Yeah.
My son will, I have no idea how he knows it. I guess there's just this telepathy between the two of them of when there's like a game that night. And he
Mhm.
goes to sleep at, I like to pretend, a decent hour.
Yeah.
Sometimes on a Tuesday
Preference
night we do,
special nights.
right. We Tuesday, some Tuesday nights do better than others, but he'll wake up, he'll come downstairs, stressed, shoes on, the routine, and he'll walk over to the Alexa and say, Alexa, what was the score of
Yeah.
the blank game?
Yeah.
And Alexa immediately delivers
No.
it. Now, we use Alexa. I use Alexa to roll through the news while I'm loading the dishwasher and like sometimes to play music for me. And
Mhm.
here, 8-year-old son is like going to get that instant
Yeah.
answer from Alexa. And I'm sort of like always caught off guard
Yeah.
because I have no interest in looking up what the score is, nor
Right.
do I think he should care that much. But like, I guess I also maybe don't care if he knows who won the baseball game last night. Like,
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
exploration in that.
No, but there's also, and look, and I can go back to like my brothers and I used to fight over the newspaper because different ones of us, and look, I always lost, I think, to my brothers because they were interested in every statistic, because every statistic used to be, not every, but in the newspaper. But so who got it first got to get the scores from last night first, right? That's not going to happen for most people. Although, if you do have a newspaper delivered, which you could, then they look up scores. But
Tova, I think that requires that I get dressed before they walk down the
yes,
stairs and
exactly.
get to the end of my driveway. Let's pretend that's never going to happen, but
No,
continue. I
that's not going to happen.
appreciate those families that are like, find it in the newspaper.
But I
For
will
some
give
of
you an
us,
example. Somebody just told me that while I was with them, they were visiting from California. They have a 4-year-old who got sports obsessed in the last year. And not only did he get interested in scores, he's very numbers minded. And I said, oh, he's going to love box scores. You've got to like find box, like more statistics for him. So he did. And then he started saying, and they get the newspaper delivered on Saturday and Sunday, wherever it is they live, or they get something. And then like on Sundays, they drive to a cafe and they get like a croissant and coffee and they buy the
Sounds like they're
newspaper.
like
And
that
it's like,
sounds real luxurious.
yeah, so that's like their ritual, right? They're like out in the LA area out there. They have to drive everywhere. Okay, so they drive and they do this. And then he realized that his dad could check the sports scores. And so, once or twice the dad did, and like you, and so finally they said to him, you know what? We're going to wait and we're going to get the score tomorrow, which he didn't like, as you can imagine. But I think it's an example of, I do think it's up to the parents. If you don't want your child using Alexa for that, then you can't have Alexa around. And I think that's the part that parents grapple with. Oh, well, I don't want to change
That's
my
right.
life.
That's right.
On us. Or if I don't want them grabbing my phone and using it, then find a place that you're going to all put phones away. Because guess what? They breathe us in.
Yes.
They see, oh, we're at the dinner table underneath the
Yes.
table checking.
Yes.
And then you go, what are you doing, mommy? What are you doing, Dad? Oh, it's just a quick thing. Well, guess what they learn?
Right.
When we're together, we're not really together.
That's right.
And so I think it's that piece that is an onus on parents. And I'm always like, I don't want to burden parents anymore, but they watch us as young ones, as middle, and as older. And so if you have a rule like when we come in, the phones go over there and there's no phones at the table, the parents have to follow that too. And we don't, it depends on who you are and who's ever listening, but people used to say to me when phones were kind of newer, like, what do you do when you go to a restaurant? I have 3 sons. Aren't they all checking sports scores? And I was like, oh, no. Our children know from home, you will not have a phone out at a restaurant. Now, would they go into the bathroom and take bathroom breaks? And they would probably stagger them. But when they would come back, I'd be like, did you check my team too?
Right.
Go ahead and check your team, but you better check mine as well. Let me hear who's winning. So, but they knew not to have them at the table. And then they started pointing out other people, like, look at that whole family's on their phones. And I'd just be like, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I guess my point here is we as the adults have to really, it's another layer of what am I doing? Because this is what the children absorb and the teenagers absorb. And that's life. So is it shifting? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that AI has come in, but we've had search engines a long time and we've had instant access. But if you do any of those fun things, which can be fun, particularly with younger children, elementary age, you're like, we have a book on the shelf. Go get that book. And let's, remember you have the biography of, they like sports biography or inventors or whatever it is. Let's look it up and see. And the kids are like, no, check your phone. No, we're not doing that right now. But then they have fun with you, leafing through and trying to find it.
Oh, yes. As soon as you're on an adventure of curiosity, exploration, and it can be like the tiniest little thing to, something like existential and outstanding and never
interacting with us.
Totally.
Love it.
I think what was so clear in your book and what I find myself trying to do a lot in the parenting space, and for a lot of listeners, I have another podcast called Let's Begin, How to Raise Your Children and Yourself at the same time. And it's a really important log line of like, you're raising yourself in order to either one, stop cycles that you don't want your kids to have to like figure out themselves. But the most well-rounded children tend to be, I find, in spaces where parents have done really sincere work on themselves, confronting their own insecurities, confronting their own, for me, it's perfectionism, self-worth. For my husband, it's something else. And I can see that reflected in my kids. I think what I struggle with, particularly in the age of AI, is this like relationship with immediacy. It's my kid's birthday. I need a piñata. There are no piñata stores in the suburbs of Philly. So where do I go? I go to the World Wide Web real quick. Yeah. And in some cases, I end up on Amazon. And I really try hard to put my money where use my money where my mouth is. In this case, there was a very specific pinata that my son wanted for his birthday, of which did not exist on any other places but Amazon.com. And it was like instant, easy, one, something I could check
Yep.
off my many, very long list of things to do in preparation for his party. Two, he knew that's where he could get it.
Mhm.
Um, and I had this, and I find myself having this conundrum daily, which is if he gets downstairs and asks for the sports scores first, like by the time I'm on the last step of the stairs, here it is his answer. And like, I'm just like, eat your cereal, please get your bowl into the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Like, ship
And
has
do you
sailed on the lesson that day. Right, exactly. And do I
care?
care? But
Yeah.
it's the same thing with like, oh, you want this specific emoji pinata? Like, okay, like let's just get it really quick so that I can make sure I don't forget to send the invitations out
Mhm.
again today. And and the same thing is happening with me and AI,
Mhm.
which is as I'm thinking about how to raise my children, I have found myself, and this is like rage bait right here. So if you are a child psychologist, if you're a psychologist, anyone who has, just take a deep breath, this is going to really get under your skin. I have gone to AI to ask questions about how to ask questions to my kids about how they're feeling.
Yeah.
So I'm well versed in my feelings thanks to my phenomenal therapist of 5 or 6 years. But there's some things that I'm still learning about my kids. I'm very extroverted. One of my children is voluntarily quiet and doesn't always raise their
Yeah.
hand when they know the answer in school. And I've tried to get to the bottom of it, and I've gone to AI to help me get that instant answer of like, what do you think this could be? Oh, ask these 4 or 5 questions. And AI was right. And so I'm like, I know this conundrum has
Mhm.
to do with my behavior. If I want them not to bring phones to the table, my phone better not be anywhere around. I know if I don't want them to have a long relationship with AI and get their immediate answer, I also can't go
Yep.
there.
Yep. And also to know, so here's another piece I think about being a parent today that really is, unique or different is I think parents for a long time just didn't know things and maybe turned to a friend or, coworker or something and sort of crowdsourced it on their own. Like my coworker says this, I'm hearing that. Um, but now we feel like there's an answer and I've got to get an answer. And there's not an answer. Like, I'm sorry to tell you, there's like 60 different answers. And it gets back to, can I sit in uncertainty? Maybe my child is quieter than I am. Maybe my child doesn't raise their hand the way that I would or I would like them to. And maybe if I whisper in their ear, you can raise your hand. Eventually they will. But it's us accepting our children for who they are. But we are in a fix it culture.
Mhm.
What's wrong with my child? What's the label? They need to fit in at school, depending on what place you're in, the competition to get into the best, you name it, whether it's a gifted program or art school or private school or whatever you're going for, it becomes like a badge of honor for the parents because it's competitive. And when you start to let go of those things, that's back to like, how well do you know yourself? If you can let go of those things and say, my child is separate from me, it's not my job to fix them. It's my job to know them. And to also, I keep pointing people to, there was an article recently in one of the papers about somebody like asked AI a medical question and got like 4 different answers just by changing like one adjective or one word. I mean, that's kind of dangerous. And I think as a parent, there's more, I see this out there, not just in New York City, but also mainly in cities where there's a lot of people, parents building more community with each other. And I
Mhm.
think that's the counter that they're saying, I don't want to be on, whether it's a search engine or now AI. I'm not sure there's that huge a difference between them. People have been doing this for a long time because we've had access to our phones in our palm, but they're like, they want to be together more. And why do they want to be together more? Because in person, they're craving that. But also, when you vent to each other about your hard morning, or you cannot believe your child's terrible behavior, and somebody else goes, "Oh, my child did that too," you're relieved.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my, first of all, my child's not an awful human being, but
Right.
also maybe there's nothing wrong. Oh, I've met your kid. I've seen your kid at school. They seem okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know what? He lied like that too. 4 years old, 5 years old, when he was getting power. Like, and that you need human connection for. And so I see much more of this, parents, as you were saying, like some of your cousins, thinking that they're reinventing parenthood. But I see it each generation, like, oh, we're doing this, parent gathering in a park or at a cafe or wherever it is, especially with people have a little bit more flexible work hours in some places. And so, but they do it almost as if no one's done it before. And I love that because they're parents for the first time, or they're the first time parent of two kids, whatever it is. But I see much more parents trying to find ways to come together. And schools have worked very hard. It's been very hard to get parents to show up in schools since the pandemic because Zoom became so big. But they're making much more efforts, all kinds of places, to bring parents into schools, for whether it's, an activity or, not to burden parents, but, meetings in person, that kind of thing. And when that happens, you almost always hear like, oh, I dragged myself there. I didn't want to go. It was one more
I'm
thing.
so glad I did. Right.
Oh my gosh, I met this person, or I chatted with this dad, and I was like, oh, I'm not alone in this. And you don't get that from, whether it's Alexa or your phone or anything else. And so I think it's knowing that we can counter this, but that we must, and it must be
Yeah.
intentional. It's not automatic. We're all tired.
Yeah, we're all tired. We all have really long to-do lists. Somebody else on a former episode of this series said, my fear is not that AI will free up more time. My fear is that AI will free up more time and you're still pounding yourself with your to-do list. You're not going outside and touching grass. And I think that's so valuable. And this is a subject that I just have so much to say. I have so much to say because I think I'm okay with my son getting quick sports scores. But what I think I want to double down on as a parent is the antithesis of speed, what I think I want to double down on as the antithesis of speedy answers is the importance of building relationships and the long investment that takes. I am of the belief that the myth, the business structure of the nuclear family, that everyone is supposed to have their own home with their own white picket fence, with their own blender and their own vacuum and their own fill in the blank, has absolutely failed us. That there is such benefit in multi-generational living if you have access to things like that, in leaning on neighbors. I'm at the point in my relationship with other parents where I can text them and be like, oops, I'm late. Can you grab the kid? And I'll see you when I see you at your house.
Absolutely.
And those relationships are so much more valuable to me and to my children. And I can almost devalue the instant sports score that he gets on the Alexa as an exception to it. And that building community, Tova, feels like it's that building that community, Tova, feels like it's that ancient parenting instinct and technology that we need to recover now.
Yes. And I think institutions are trying, whether they're religious institutions, schools, community. I live in New York City, and these stores keep opening. I see them that are like, maybe little gift stores or whatever, but they'll do like community in the evening, come learn to sew, or, sip in, whatever it is.
I heard a really cute one, Stitch and Bitch.
Stitch and Bitch. There you go.
Bitch.
Every parent needs that, right? And they're like, you don't have to have ever sewn anything in your life, right?
Right.
So I totally agree with you. What children need is relationships and connection. And I think when we go into it knowing that, but I also think the part of us that worries so much about AI, I can tell anybody who will listen, AI is not replacing parents. There's no touching, there's no cuddling, there's no looking into the eyes of your child and nodding with them like, yeah, that sucks. Like that really sucks. Your friend did what? Not fun. That's human connection. Laying down at night to put them to bed, or sitting with them and, rubbing their head or whatever you do, or kissing them goodnight. All of that is human connection. That's not going to change because AI is here. And so it is that intentionally building community and saying to ourselves, why don't I trust my neighbor to pick up my kid? Oh, I do trust my neighbor to pick up my kid. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. Living in an apartment building, I would say, well, there's the great thing about apartment living. You've got neighbors,
Oh, it's the
right?
best. I miss it so much.
Or if the house is close next to you, sending your 5-year-old, can you take this measuring cup? Can you ask them for some flour? Because
Right.
I'm breading chicken right now and I don't have any flour.
Right.
But remembering that's what we're supposed to do and doing it. And that takes, it's funny to say that the town square takes work on the parents' part, but also on the weekend, whether it's playing in your backyard or saying, you know what, I saw this really cool playground. The next town over, let's go there. Take something on parents' parts. But the other thing I want to say is those long lists, because my children are now grown, the more we pare down our lists, which, gets into perfectionism, that's another podcast for you, separate, you can do that, is children don't actually need much, right? They don't. So you buy that great piñata, but you don't need to do like 6 other things that day for their birthday. And I think that we put a lot of pressure on ourselves as if there's a right way or the best way, or I have to do it better, or my child asked for 6 things. That's okay. They're not having all 6 things, even though they asked for them and you love them.
Yeah.
And that's the part of childhood that they're supposed to be mad at us. They're supposed to not like us. Like, that's how you help them build that thing that I'm calling resilience, right? This ability to say, oh, I'm really mad at my parent right now. And then finding out that the parent still loves them. Yeah, you threw that fit because I didn't take you to that batting cage today, but you know what? We're good now.
Yeah.
That's
You're allowed to be disappointed.
Yeah.
It really does feel like the only way. I'm going to see Tova if I can thread this needle. It's going to be a really hard one. I was sitting on the sidelines of my daughter's sports game yesterday, and parents on the sidelines of sports fields should also be its own conversation, of which I am broadly and universally disappointed by how parents have invested in their kids' performance on the sport field, because it feels transactional. It feels loaded with expectations. It feels like the parents see it as a reflection of themselves. And that is, I believe, so overwhelmingly toxic and dangerous for a kid, because then they spend
unfair.
And they spend years, even their lives, trying to make you applaud them, approve of them, without them trying to figure out who they are. And
you just wrote my book. There you go.
There you go. It's because it's highly coded. Thank you, Tova.
Yes.
But what I hope happens in response to not just AI, but this perfectionism of what we're seeing in the algorithm, and your kids' sports scores or your academic scores, or the myth of that some sort of university is going to guarantee them some sort of payroll. We are, as a family, moving homes, and we're looking at a series of different schools. And my conversations with a host of different admissions directors or superintendents is all about where the kids are going to end up after 12th grade, as if that is any sense of like absolute sureness that is how they could pay their bills and have a full thriving life. But if this series is about the ancient technologies that we can bring forward that are thousands of years old, that can help us find ourselves more, and then therefore maybe make the world a little bit more peaceful, loving, equitable, like all the big
Yeah.
tree huggery language that I'm so committed to. But I don't know. Hold on. Let me just pause for a second. I want to make sure I'm really clear on the point I'm trying to make here because I don't want to be the one talking in this segment. I want you to be. So let me put it into a question. My fear is that parents won't self-correct themselves quick enough. That AI, the machine itself, is going to become more available than the caretaker or the parent because I'm doing my to-do list. I'm juggling the amount of jobs that I am that they might be too insecure to ask me questions about puberty or their broken heart or the conundrum that they're in because they can safely get it somewhere else instead of sitting in awkwardness with
Mhm.
their parent. And I am doing the things in life. So my phone is always
Mhm.
in my right hand, even though I fully have the intention, Tova, of like putting that thing
Mhm.
aside. And so I'm afraid my generation of parents aren't going to lead. I'm afraid I'm afraid my generation of parents aren't going to have the wisdom to lean on that ancient technology of like community building, sharing vulnerability with each other, complaining to each other that our kids are being brats quick enough to realize that that's actually the only thing that
Well,
matters.
I'm going to actually argue back with you because I think I'm actually, again, and I'm always like, well, I'm not Pollyannish. And I say that as a denial to say, I see the harms. I see the potential harms. But what I see over and over as a person in psychology, as somebody who has studied some of the most traumatic events that happen to parents and children, is that people crave other people. And that's human. And so will it swing initially? It's been swinging. That's not new. Like I've had to ask people over and over like, "Wait, AI, but haven't we been searching, on search engines forever?" It's just like the next step, right? But for your generation of parents, it's new, but the last 15 years had Google and other things. So, but what keeps happening is parents keep finding each other and they think it's new. They're like, "Oh, we meet at a cafe on Saturday morning." Like the day I just saw something posted from LA, I think, these dads meeting up. There were like 12 of them. And they were like all so happy. And I was like, "Oh, that's great." Like they've invented the wheel for themselves. And I think humans find each other over and over, particularly when there's children. Why? Because you have to show up at school, right? Or you have to put them on the school bus and there's five other parents at the bus stop and somebody goes, "Oh, what teacher did your kid get?" "Oh, or, "Oh, you are so lucky. She's the best," or whatever it is. And that's the bus stop talk for, 5 minutes in the morning and you start to connect. Um, so all of those little moments matter when you show up at school because you have to. Your kid's sick and you got to pick them up, or you do drop off because you do drop off. And all of those things tell people again, "Oh, I actually need this." And you don't need a lot of people. You don't need to be in a crowd.
Mhm, mhm.
So I actually think the pendulum might swing and people think, "Oh, AI has all the answers." And then they go and they search for something that doesn't work and then doesn't work. And then they feel terrible because we always blame ourselves. "I
Yeah,
did everything the AI said." But people used to do it with magazines, believe it or not. Parenting magazine, they'd be like, "I followed every step."
right.
And I'm like, "Yeah, but that's a lovely article, but they don't know your child." And then
Why
they
do you
go to books and and then they talk to their friend. Their friend says, "Read this or try that." So I think the need for others is so human and for children too. And people are pushing back in those schools throughout the country, places you might think they would, and places you wouldn't, against the use of technology in their kids' schools loudly. Now, is it a small movement growing? Yes, but it always starts small.
Yeah.
Everything starts small with a couple of very wise, but also, pissed off parents and watch out, right? And now they're pushing back against AI. And we're going to have to keep pushing.
Tova, do you think this generation of parents are more insecure than previous generations?
Great question. Yeah. I think it keeps going up. It's always hard to say generationally, it's hard to say, but I've been in the field over 30 years now, and for years I was like, "Oh, anxiety's higher than ever," and, "Oh, I live in a big city and it's always worse here." And each year I would say it, and then I stopped saying it because I was like, "Anxiety keeps going up, anxiety keeps going up." That's what I call the undermining of, well, what do I think in my heart, in my soul, in my gut, and what do I want? Or what's my touch point? Sometimes if I talk, I do a lot of work one-on-one with parents or in parent groups, usually online, but more and more people are asking for those groups in person.
Do
Or
you
to,
think why do you think parents are insecure today, whether it's
too much
bigger.
information.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to ask you two
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
Why do you think parents are increasingly more insecure in your eyes?
Mhm.
And why don't you think parents know what they want?
Yeah. So here's the thing about too much information and what we think is access to information. Right. And I say what we think is because when we go to access information, you're asking a question that's very personal. I'm a parent, this is my child, but the AI or the whatever sourcing of information doesn't know me and my issues and what I bring and doesn't know this child right now at this point in time. But we get a lot of information, right? And then you ask it a different way, or you go to a different site, because people will still be going to websites. I think they still will. And you get different information. And then you get so much information that you don't know what to do. And it keeps saying, don't trust yourself. It's almost like every bit of information is like, no, 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 you don't know. Try it this way. And I
Okay,
think that keeps undermining us.
could I push back a little bit? And
Yeah.
this is rooted in a lot of the work that I've done, and work is just bearing witness and studying the state
Mhm.
of American men. I wrote my book on the state of American women, specifically white women, and the consequence of trying to understand ourselves requires that we understand the male gaze.
Mhm.
Um, I have found that a lot of men will also make statements like, well, I don't know what I want. And like broadly speaking, we're not talking about like food and safety and access to healthcare. Like, yes, all of those like basic needs,
Right.
but sort of like really what is it that you want to get out of life, sort of, or like it feels like it can sometimes be harder and harder to get adults to be like, I just want to find more joy. I want to find joy. And there are those leaders in the community that are creating, you know, they're the leaders in the community creating the bitch and stitch groups or the men's groups or whatever it might be. Like, yay for them and more, please.
Right.
Don't you also think that we as parents are trying to heal the pressures that were put on our parents and those pressures were then put on us? Like, I had great parents, largely speaking, and like I still had a dad on the sidelines that was like, girl, hustle a little bit harder to get that ball, or and was still like high-fiving me after games. But like, my dad thinks I'm like the best thing since the stop sign was invented. And there's absolutely
So
a part of me that is like, I don't want to disappoint
I
him.
was going to say, you're still trying to,
I'm still trying
but
not to. So, like, isn't that a generational thing?
yes, but it's not one generation. That's what I'm pushing back on. Every group of parents thinks this is just us because we weren't parents 40 years ago. We're only parents now, right? Everybody has their story, everybody has their context. This is your story. This is my story that my children are now older, right? There's always a context, whether it's war, whether it's, immigrant story, whether it's I was pressured. um, but if you continue as an adult to try to please your adult parents and don't let go of that, not everybody does that, but a lot of people do, men and women. This is like equal opportunity, not gender divide. Then we put it on our children.
Yeah.
You're supposed to please me. And we
That's
usually
right.
put it on the firstborns.
Yes. And
Not always, but usually.
spare us if you're a firstborn girl.
Yeah. Yeah. Firstborns. I'm gonna say firstborns is
Okay.
in my experience. Latterborns are always better off. I'm like, if you have five, you didn't notice the second, third, fourth, and then you notice the fifth because that's your baby, and you treat them like they're the first again in many ways. But if you really want your child to become who they are, which is the final chapter of my book, but it's not really the final chapter. I'm like, if you only read one, read that. You know, it's about seeing our children for who they are, not who we want them to be. We can model to them, this is love, this is acceptance. Even when we, you know, I blow up at you or I do things I wish I hadn't done as a parent, I can come back to you, but I need to see you for who you are. But all of that rah, 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 oh, you didn't get an A, what happened? Right? Is like the child absorbs, I must not be good enough.
That's
I must
right.
not be good enough. And then we put it over on our children because we're still trying to please our parents.
That's
I
right.
can tell you how often I'm working with parents. I do a lot of work with parents, and it's around this. Whose voice are you hearing and who are you trying to please? And then they'll say, I've never been able to please my dad. Never.
Right.
And sometimes that parent's deceased. Then I have to jokingly
Right.
say,
They're still doing it.
you're never going to please that parent.
Right.
They're gone.
Right.
Right? So it's really, it's all of the above. And being a parent is hard enough. And we live in a much faster world. That's, I think, some of the biggest changes over the last, let's say, 20 or 30 years. Things move quickly. And in the last decade, the bombardment of news, of media, and then the curated life. We didn't have that before. I'm like, I have to get myself off of Instagram. I'm like, holy smokes, when you see these curated lives on whatever, you know, product people use, like, that's just one piece of life. But being a parent is good, bad, ugly, rotten, and so is being a child. They're good, they're bad, they're rotten, they're wonderful. It's all of it. And so it is moving away from this messaging of, I'm going to tell you how to do it right and all will be good. I mean, growing up is like a zigzaggy, backwards, forward, zigzag, falling off, coming back, but being a parent is the same way. It's just a long journey. And I don't think anybody's prepared for that, myself included. Like, here I was in the field and I was like, I'm having a baby, but we all start from like square one.
And don't you think that's the mistake? Meaning, and again, this is about access for somebody like me. I happen to have been the oldest of 20. I happen to have been the oldest of 25 grandchildren. I started changing diapers and babysitting children very early. I saw a whole host of aunts and uncles raise their children dramatically different. When I came into my parenting, I was able to look back and be like, I saw this one do this, I'm doing that. I saw this one do this, and I'm definitely not
It would
doing
just be
that.
easy, right?
Right. And to me, the reason why I stepped with such confidence into parenting is simply because I had exposure to the fact that breastfed or not breastfed, the kids are still going to learn to ride the bike. If they don't learn to ride the bike or they do learn to ride the bike, they're still going to be literate. If they become literate at age 4 or they become literate at age 11, they're still going to be able to apply to undergrad. Like, I saw that the dominoes never have the sequence of the pressures that we assume.
Yeah.
And when the nuclear family is rooted in capitalistic extractive economies, meaning Jenna has to have her own house and Tova has to have her own house so we can sell 2 different blenders, not 1, 2.
And compete.
And compete with each other, that whose kid's the fast runner, whose kid gets into school, whatever it might be, who gets the new Cadillac. I always root this competition.
Who got the highest
Right.
A,
I always root this competition in the 50s for some odd reason. But that everything about parenting today is rooted in extraction capitalism. And then when we go to big companies and algorithms for what should I have my kids play flag football or contact football? Then the person who gets to own the suggestion and then own the equipment companies on the other side are the big companies that already own all of the information, when the ancient technology itself says, forget all of that. Like the kids are going to fall down and scrape their knees. There's going to be many times you don't know what the hell to do. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen.
Yes.
But you have to do that in community.
Not only in community, but learning to trust yourself that skin knee or broken wrist because of whatever they were doing is part of growing up. Not you're a bad parent, not you should have stopped them, but that this is part of growing up. And when we step back, we genuinely step back and say, I've got to let them become themselves. And sometimes it's going to be a smooth path and sometimes it's not. Then we can stop labeling kids as good or bad or successful or not successful, because every child learns to read in a different way. I mean, maybe there's a bunch of them who learn down the middle, but lots of them learn different ways.
For the record, I did not learn to read until I was 11. My mom thought I was going to be on her payroll my entire life.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I published a book with 400 sources, of which 0 people read all 400 sources. And she looked at me and she's like, I sincerely, in the back of my mind, think you can't read.
Yeah, because she never changed.
Yeah, right? She's like, I'm still stuck there.
Yeah.
Like, you couldn't read the back of the cereal box, and all of your friends could that Saturday morning, and I realized you were in trouble.
Yeah, and I got you help.
Yes.
So, but it's this idea that children are supposed to grow in some straight line. Water them, they go forward. Water them, they go. Look, we all thought that. And then you had a baby. And then if you had a second one, for those of us who have more than one, you're like, whoa, this is so different than the first one. Nothing's wrong necessarily, but they're different. And so when we start to accept that, we can fumble with them, because it is fumbling and falling and getting back up. And, that's how it is. But we live in a very, very competitive society, not just as parents, but everything. And so then the messages we get all the time are, if you don't do this right, they'll never succeed, however you want to define that. They'll never succeed. They'll never make a living. They won't make enough of a living.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets more and more competitive. I think that's probably the biggest danger for parents.
Is the competition amongst each other.
And just society's messaging about competition. Don't you want a go-getter? Don't you want a go-getter? Well,
right.
It's a long path between 4 years old or 6 or 8 and their adult life. And you know what? It may take them a little while or a long while in their adult life too, but they'll get there. They'll get there.
Tova, I have 2 final questions.
Yeah.
One, I have to bring it back to AI somehow.
Yeah.
So give me a sec. And feel free to just find a way to get it in your answer. Do you, how big of a risk do you think access to parenting or parenting questions? Hold on, no, that's not the right way to ask the question. Mm-hmm. Do you think access to AI and a quick answer, whether it's right or not, is going to jeopardize our relationship to intuition and self and knowing even more than previous generations?
Yeah, I mean, I worry about whether AI will continue to make parents less secure rather than more secure. That it goes back to, I always use that term undermine, which is, will it undermine, what do I think is right? Because if AI keeps telling me, there's one answer, and anybody who works with children know there's not one answer. They need love, but there's a lot of ways to show love, right? They need adults to take care of them, but there's a lot of ways to be caring for children. So I do worry that AI will take parents steps backwards, more insecure, more nervous, more competitive, like all of these things that children don't need, but we also don't need as adults. It's hard enough to be a parent. You want somebody who says, yeah, that was a rough day. You did a good job. Don't worry about the right answer. And AI goes, here's the right answer, right? It's it's instant. Here's the right answer. Oh, you did that, it didn't work. Then every parent feels terrible. Mm-hmm. Right? So I have concerns about that, of people thinking that AI is an answer and a quick answer. It might be fine for how do you heat a bottle, mm-hmm. but I don't know. What if you get the wrong answer in AI? I think people need to be very skeptical. And need more work around, I'm not going to always know, and that's okay.
But that requires that this generation of caretakers break the cycle of the myth of knowing.
The myth of knowing, it's a great term. Use that term, write a book on that. The myth of knowing, because we don't know. And even when you know for one child, you don't know for the second, you don't know for the fourth, you don't. And yeah, it's a myth of knowing. It's as if information is the answer, but the answer is this relationship, this very precious relationship. I don't mean precious like you're going to hurt them, but precious meaning I connect to my child this way and I connect to my other child that way. But you have one child who wants the sports scores and is elated, and another child doesn't care. Like, they're two different humans. And so if they're different humans, then it's about our relationship with them. And that AI can't do and never will be able to.
One of the first episode in this series is about the incredible power and importance of protecting the not knowing and the not running to the answers so quickly. And you mentioned earlier how important you thought it was to think about, examine, put through extraordinary rigor whether we do or don't need screens in classrooms. I have my opinions that change often. I wonder if there is something comparable to the kind of scrutiny we need to consider AI in classrooms with as well. And somebody offered a comment, which was so great. They mentioned that we weren't allowed to use calculators during math tests at
Yeah.
one point. And that does feel like the exact and perfect
Yeah.
comparable that I haven't heard anyone make,
Yeah.
because we all know I certainly use a calculator when I do everything in my adulthood, but I am glad I learned long division
Yeah.
using my brain.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the more when children learn and figure it out, they also feel great, even if it was really hard to figure it out. This starts very early in life, right? Probably with infants, but certainly with toddlers. And, when you struggled through and you get that piece into the puzzle, that last piece, whether it's a 5-piece puzzle at a young age or a 500, you feel great. And it's that kind of boost that pushes children on to want to learn more. So just getting the answer actually is often not very satisfying. It's really not. It's like, oh, okay, that's the answer. Now I'm done. But the more experiences they have of, I figured that out, or I figured it out differently than all that advice, when they're like, enough, and they're pushing us away, like, don't tell me how to do it enough. They're sometimes not so politely, but then they figure it out. They're like, I got it. And we have to give them opportunities for, I got it, or I didn't get it, and I have to learn to deal with it. That's where they build their reserves of, it doesn't feel good when I can't figure it out, or it doesn't feel good when I don't make the team I wanted, but I'm going to be okay. And so, again, that's where we have to buffer from AI, truly. It's not that they're not going to ever use it. We're all using it every single day, whether we think we are or not. We're all using it. You can also point that out to children. You do use AI. Guess what? When you did that thing, that was AI powered. So it's not denying them. The world is filled with it. It has been for quite a while. But it's that, do we give them enough opportunities to both struggle a bit and then get it, because it's the getting it that's just feels so good. That's the delicious part.
Sometimes when I'm juggling and like pounding on my
Yeah.
keyboard trying to send messages to people, I
Yeah.
mute to spare everybody.
Yeah.
Dr. Tova Kleiman, Dr. Tova Klein, thank you so much for taking the time today. What I hear in your work is that resilience is not something we demand from our children. It is something we help build around them and ultimately within ourselves, so we can be the role models for whatever comes next.
Whatever comes next, because we have no idea.
We have no
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All of Tova Klein's work will be provided in the show notes, and you can find her book, Raising Resilience, wherever you get your books. The small local bookstore.
Yeah,
Stop.
I hope you have a small local bookstore. Yay.
Tova, thank you so much for coming.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. I really am grateful that we were able to do that. I'm grateful that I forget how it ended up connecting with Shilpa way back in the day, but I continue to have these conversations because all I do is think about this, particularly when it comes to parenting. So I'm sure there will be a lot more public conversations for
And
you
you
and
know
I to
what?
have in the future.
It's so important because the world is changing and parents need us to say, here's what matters, and it's your connection to your child. Even when it's not, doesn't feel good, it still matters.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. I also don't know what that looks like all the time.
Yeah.
Like yesterday, my son and I, we had it out because of a tonal request he made of his sister to find a ball. And it was like a total blow up. And the
Yeah.
whole time I'm like, am I doing this right? Am I really picking this right? Like, is this the battle I should be
But you can't
picking
pull yourself
on this
back.
subject? Right. I mean, it is very, in my house, no is a complete conversation, like end of sentence, paragraph long dissertation. But I still found myself questioning it the whole time. And I was like, am I having as much humility? Am I just like trying to get
You're
to the
hard
next
on
thing?
yourself, Jenna.
Yeah, of course I
Yeah.
am.
Yeah.
Of course I am.
If you go back to that child, for every parent, it's when we go back to that child and go like, I own this.
Yeah. I think I messed that up. The
Yeah.
repairing. Yeah. Is so
Yeah.
important. It's so
But it has to
important.
be genuine when you're ready. And, relationships are long term. I would say it's
Right.
patterns that matter. Is it
Right.
mainly that, or is it mainly pretty good stuff or good enough stuff? That's what they need.
I think it's good enough.
Yeah.
At least that's what I'm telling
Love
myself.
is love is love. Yeah.
Love is love. I love it. All right, Tova, thank you so much. You can just click whatever end button you see because I have somebody else. I have DZ
Where is
coming on.
the, oh, the leave? No.
Yes, but if you want to stay on and listen to DZ
Yeah.
and I, you are welcome to if
How
you're
do I
gonna
do that?
okay. That I don't know. Give me
All
one
right.
second.
Well, it
I can
might
make
be. I'll have to listen to it when it comes out.
Yeah, but if you want to listen to it now, you can. Hold on. Shit. Um Just hide her is what Jay is saying. How do I hide? Oh, I'm going to hide you.
Okay.
I'm going to hide you. I'm going to mute you, and I'm going to bring on DZ.
And you're sure you won't be able to hear me breathing?
I'm going to mute you. I'll find out.
Okay.
Okay. Bye, Tova. Thank you. Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. I think I hit her. I'm muting her. Great. There he is. Hold on. DZ. Ooh, you have like
Hello.
hello. You have like a new ambiance. Thanks, Jay. You have a new like ambiance.
Yeah, now I'm home. So
Oh, so that you have a red light at home? That's your
I have a whole kinds of lights. If the light's not good, I can adjust things.
Well, I mean, Jay's not here.
Yeah. Well,
So I'll just
less than
ignore
10.
it.
Yeah. There we go.
How was your trip home?
It was great, but now it feels like back to the actual work of, instead of talking, it's so easy to talk about this stuff. It's a lot harder to actually get it done. Yeah.
Get what done? What are you doing?
Oh.
Solving AI for us? Great.
Yeah, that trying to get consumers better choice in the AI marketplace.
What does that mean? Pitch us. You have a couple of people in here who are like, what does that mean?
Most people don't feel like they have choice about the technology that shows up in their lives, right? You take what you are given because you don't want to be left behind. You want to have a job in this economy. And that leaves people feeling pretty disempowered, right? Like, even if we live in a democracy, we do not live in a democracy when it comes to technology. That's a problem, especially for technology like AI. So I would like to see consumers have a lot more choice about how technology shows up in their lives. And I would like to see people have the ability to choose how technology shows up in their lives. So that's a long-term project. I'm just moving the microphone closer to my face. That's a long-term project because it requires people to feel like this is something they actually have some amount of control over. And I think right now they don't.
Yeah, no, I definitely did not choose. I mean, of course I chose my email server, and of course I It's like the myth of all the yogurt selections at the store. Like
Yeah.
there's 1,000 yogurts to choose from, and you believe but there's or like the nail polish selection at the manicure pedicure. It's like, ooh, there's thousands of colors. No, it's just like 100 different variations of red. The question is whether or not you like the myth of needing nail polish to begin with, like that exploration underneath it. You think that there's like this false individualism.
Yeah, I'll tell you a story from a couple weeks ago. As you know, having a conversation at this AI conference in Greece, and there, someone raised the question, wouldn't it be great if we just like turn off our phones for a day? Um, and I had to be like, that is a practice that some people do have. There is a religious practice where you turn off your
Wait,
phone
first
for
off, back up,
25
DZ.
hours.
Who said that? What was their religious background? Like, what was the context of this? And who
Oh,
goes to a religious AI conference and doesn't know what Shabbat is?
You would be surprised because it feels kind of impossible, right? It feels impossible to have a religious practice that revolves around controlling your relationship to technology, even if it's something that you aspire to. There has been a little bit of writing about this, right? There's like been a couple books that have come out in the last 10, 15 years about like, isn't the Sabbath great as a concept? But actually achieving it within the context of a religious community is very hard. Like even if you know what it is, even if you know and admire the idea that turning off your phone for 25 hours is possible, actually doing it is quite difficult. In fact, it's so difficult that I don't know that any other communities outside of Orthodox Judaism have actually managed to achieve it. Now, I think Orthodox Jews themselves kind of got lucky. They didn't really intend to have like a no
Right.
phone day. They kind of like, they early on, like Jews bought into this idea that electricity and the Sabbath don't mix. And then like from electricity, you get all the way up to phones. So I don't know that they would have been able to make that choice intentionally, but I think they are happy that it kind of ended up in that place.
But isn't that the whole genesis of this podcast is there are ancient technologies, and I'm not necessarily endorsing that people go back to some of the conservative. Isn't that the whole genesis of this podcast, that there is ancient technology that exists that can help us navigate some of the conundrums that we're facing? You will not see orthodox or conservative practices in my home, yet I am striving to be less technologically dependent, not because I want it to be harder for me to find my kids proper cleats for soccer, or because I don't want the other class mom to be able to send me photos of the class party that day. Like I want all of those things, but there is something I want less of, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Look, I'll tell you just as a lived experience. So I'm not Orthodox, but I do observe like the Sabbath and all its, and all its various strictures. And there is a moment, yes,
Wait, pause. Remember, not all listeners know what it is.
sure.
So you observe Sabbath, and
Yeah.
that is okay. Go ahead.
So I observe the Sabbath. So, every 7 days from Friday night at sundown to Saturday night, there is a quite a long list of things that I don't do, including not driving in a car and not turning on and off electrical lighting, and not, gardening and all kinds of things along those lines that in the ancient world would have been classified as work. And one of those things, the thing that feels biggest in my mind, although it's a really late addition, is not using my phone. And so there's a moment every Friday afternoon, like, around dusk, when I put my phone away and I have this pull, right? This like sense of like, but are you really ready to turn off your notifications? Like, are you really ready to not have that influx for 24, 25 hours? And I feel that for like 3 minutes, and then it goes away, and I couldn't be happier. Like, I couldn't be happier that I was free of
Right,
it, and
you're
it
like
feels
free.
like
But sorry,
yeah.
you have anxiety. DZ, let it be known for all of eternity that DZ, when he puts his phone down, there's this moment of panic.
Yes, but it goes away. And there was a study out of Ben Gurion University that for people who observe the Sabbath in this way regularly, that get to skip out on the feelings of withdrawal that people normally feel if you just like randomly take their phone away on a Tuesday. Like there's something about the communal aspect to it that
Mm.
actually allows people to feel like, no, no, no,
I'm not
like your
alone.
phone is away and it's okay. It's really okay. Like it's at least for today, it's okay. And then of course, on Saturday night it all comes flooding back. But it feels like a different quality of life for that day.
Does your relationship with time feel different? And then also I want to know, when you go to pick up your phone again, are you ever like, "Oh, I don't want to touch that thing."
Um, yes to the second one. I don't know if my relationship to time feels different. My relationship to my kids feels different, right?
Oh, perfect segue.
Right? There's like a way that like you can relate to your kids. You can be like fully present when like you don't have that, dopamine device next to you. Um, and there's different kinds of things we do, right? There's like, books we read together and, board games that we play. There's like an entire like set of activities that like is basically only Shabbat activities. Sometimes I actually think about like Shabbat as being like book day because it's the one day that it actually feels possible to sink into a book. So yeah, it's an entirely different kind of existence. I will tell you, and like I feel a little bit weird about saying this, right? Like, there's often like a lot of comparisons drawn between like Hanukkah and Christmas, right? They're at the same time of year.
I don't know what you're talking
Uh,
about.
right, Hanukkah, like
Just so
more or
we're
less.
clear, just so we're clear. So there might not have been people in the religious community, the global religious community, that didn't know what Shabbat was, but 100% of people in the religious community understand the difference and the comparison between
Oh
Hanukkah and
yes.
Christmas.
Oh yes. And I think, Jews, I mean, like if you look in like the history of American Judaism, Jews have had a chip on their shoulder for a very long time about not having Christmas, right? Hanukkah kind of developed as a kind of defense mechanism against Christmas.
Yes.
Out of this concern that like the Jews are going to find out that the Christians are having so much fun and they're not going to want to hang out with us anymore. So like there's like all these like Hanukkah celebrations that are developed that are like, are kind of Christmassy and like, oh, we're gonna give gifts too, and like that's the holiday of lights. Like Hanukkah is like legitimately a holiday of lights, like that is its own thing. But a lot of the other pageantry around Hanukkah is Christmas. Um, so like
With blue, gold, and slightly sparkly wrapping paper.
exactly. But
Wait, DZ, you do know that there's like, don't move. I have to get this name right. You do know there is the mensch on a bench in response to Christmas's Elf on a Shelf.
oh yes, yeah. There's a whole genre. It's totally fascinating. It feels very American. I'm glad it all exists. Um, but I think one thing that doesn't get replicated is like if you read the lyrics of Christmas songs, like this deep sense of like everything is like warm and good and okay and we're all here together, that like I mean Jews wrote some of those songs, but like you don't get that's not the Hanukkah story. It's the Hanukkah story. Hanukkah is quite a Hanukkah is
Yeah,
quite a violent holiday, right?
yeah. You
Like
barely made it.
right, people talk about
Yeah.
like a war on Christmas, like there literally is like a war on like Hanukkah is about a war. Not to get into the history of it, like it's like celebrating a military victory that happened like around 2,300 years ago. Um, so like that doesn't fit. But there is like a moment within Judaism that does to me feel very much like a Christmas moment, and that is Shabbat. Like the Jewish Shabbat, this sense of like,
Hmm.
okay, we're actually gonna commit to like nobody's working for one day a week. It's gonna change the character of our community. We're gonna sit around, we're gonna spend time with family, and we're gonna sing about it. And it's like even striking to me that, the Christmas song, like it's the most wonderful time of the year, right? Like, extolling how awesome this day is. Like there is a song within like the Shabbat song canon, Yom Zeh Mechubad Mikol Yamim. Like this is the day that is like, more like exalted above all other days. Like the same sense of like, we're gonna like talk about how like we sit around and we eat great food and maybe we do a little bit of matchmaking and like there's all kinds of like fun things we do. So there's that same sense, but it happens once a week. And part of the reason it happens once a week is because a specific community decided, like, we're just going to make our own rules around tech. We're going to make our own rules around like work practices, which like if you try to apply that on the national level, it fails because the Supreme Court's going to be like, I'm sorry, you can't apply your religion to
Right,
everything.
right. We need toll booths to work on Friday nights too,
Right.
and
Um,
ambulances.
right.
Right.
And you could see in Israel, like there's like all kinds of debates about like running the streetcars, running the not streetcars. There's all kinds of debates about running the buses on Saturdays, right? Is that allowed? It's very hard to do on a national level, but on a communal level of like we're going to set a norm for our community or for our family about how technology looks. It can be really, really powerful. I'm sorry if that was like a complete tangent of what you actually wanted to talk about.
No. I think it's really good, DZ. I mean, I think what we need to get from you in this segment is like, I know Marin sent you some of the
Yeah.
questions. What I'm struggling with a little bit in this parenting episode is like, what is it that we're trying to do and say here? And I think I want to, without saying the obvious, which I think we can reiterate, which is parents are far too dependent on capitalism to make their kids happy at Hanukkah, and also toss frisbee the screen across the room when you don't feel like raising your kids, and just let your kids go and ask Alexa what the sports score was the night before. Like, get over it. You have bigger fish to fry. But the role that technology is playing in our lives without our choice, of course, I'm voluntarily putting an Alexa in my kitchen so that I can listen to music and the news when I'm loading the dishwasher, and my son discovered that he can get the sports scores on it. I think what we want to try to say is technology isn't going anywhere. It could be worse than we think if we're not careful now. And I also think there's something that we can say that's quite extreme, which is like, you should unplug Alexa on Friday nights, or you should, God forbid, use this ancient technology so your kids can see you read, so you don't have to continue to tell them to open the book.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're trying to say here, but like we can kind of go in any direction we want. We're basically saying this is a parent's problem, which sucks because it's all parents' problems and we're already drowning.
Yeah. Look, I think I have so much trepidation in telling parents what to do as parents. I parenting is so difficult, right? Like my first experience of becoming a parent was just the wall of choices that I needed to make that all felt incredibly consequential, and how quickly they needed to be made, and how little feedback I would have about whether I was making the right choice. Um, and it feels like that is just parenting over and over again. You don't know whether you're making the right choice for a very long time, and technology just kind of adds to it because nobody knows, right? Like when people were handing their kids iPads, no one had any idea what that was actually going to do. Like when you put Alexa in the kitchen, no one has any idea what that is going to do. And I think the first of all, I think I should say, first I would start by saying like, if you're a parent, like have some, some sympathy and kindness for yourself about the difficulty of this situation.
Nonsense.
It's okay. It's okay. And the second piece is that it is okay to try things out, and see what works and see what does not work. And it's okay to iterate. It's okay to try things, and if they fail, then they fail. Because a lot of us do not have a sense of what the right move is for technologies like this. You know, and I think there's also a huge gap between the kinds of parents that we want to be and the kinds of parents that we are. And it's also important to have like deep sympathy and space for the gap between those two things, especially when it comes to technology. Right.
Okay. We're going to come back to that. I'm going to start at the top of the questions that are a
Great.
little bit more like 101. DZ, obviously, we're trying to root the questions that we're asking about ourselves, our role today, our relationship with technology in ancient practices. What does a parent-child relationship look like in Judaism?
Yeah. So it's a little bit asymmetrical, right? So there's an obligation of parents towards children, and there's obligation of children towards parents. And the obligation of children towards parents in some ways is relatively straightforward, right? You do what your parents want you to do, right, within some limits. And the rabbis in the Talmud will talk about what those limits are. And will praise people who go to great lengths to be kind to their parents, right? There's an entire story in the Talmud about a person who is rewarded for not waking his dad up when someone wants to make this like amazing sale. Like they would have made a huge amount of money, but making the sale would have involved waking his dad up. And he doesn't do it, and he gets, it's a good job. Good job for him. So in some ways, like that obligation is relatively simple. But there's also an obligation of parents towards children that is in some ways a lot more interesting and a lot more complex, right? Well, what do you actually need to do to be a good parent? So I'll quote for you. There's a story in the Talmud. Should I explain what the Talmud is?
Great idea.
Right. So there's a story in the Talmud being kind of one of the foundational books that the rabbis wrote. This book was written between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE in Babylonia, in modern day Iran. And it writes the following. It says, a father is obligated to do the following for his son: to circumcise him, to redeem him if he is a firstborn, to teach him Torah, to find him a wife, and to teach him a trade. So let's just kind of like go through the list. Like to circumcise him, redeem him if he's a firstborn. Those are kind of like technical obligations that the Torah, that Judaism kind of like puts on a father in particular. But then to teach him Torah, right? So like education. There's an obligation to make sure that your child is literate. And I think like for the purposes of our conversation, we can swap out like father to son to like parent to child.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it, TC.
So teaching them Torah, finding them a wife, finding them a spouse, right? Which maybe we could generalize to like making sure that this person is like set up well in the world, set up
like
well
has
in
community, has relationships, knows how to be in relationship with other people. Okay.
And to teach them a trade, right? Make sure that they can eventually be self-sufficient.
Can we say that's a way to contribute to the world?
I think it's both a way to contribute to the world and also to make sure that like what does it mean to like to give your children the tools they need to succeed in life, right? Like if your kids don't really know how to function in the economy, if they don't know how to talk to people, like if they don't know how to like, use the phone or, or know how to like, send it a text exchange that seems like respectful, like they're like little things, but they're also really crucial. So like doing that stuff. But there's like a last line at the end that's totally fascinating. Others say, meaning like the rabbi is saying, like there are some rabbis who add to this list, teaching them how to swim, which is so great, right? I mean, like first, like literally, like how to swim, like, and like it like there's a Jewish obligation to teach your children how to swim, but also just kind of like metaphorically, the idea that like the world's a tough place, the world's a complicated place, and like you have to teach your kids how to like roll with the punches or like
keep their head above water,
keep their head above water, right? Like actually, you kind of don't need to translate it because like it works so well in like the modern purpose, like in the modern meaning of like what it means to swim. So there's like this sense of both these ritual obligations, these obligations around like what your kids should know, how they can contribute to society, but just like generally like how to exist in the world is all kind of part of that. And I find that like a really helpful way to think about it. What is tricky about that list is that like actually getting your kids to do all those things can be very easy or very simple depending on who the kid is. Right. It's so dependent on like what kind of person you are raising. And like, I don't know, like, I don't know about you. One of the first experiences I had within first few months of being a parent was like, there was like so much baked into this human being already that has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, that's right.
Their characteristics are already so set.
But acknowledging that, DZ, like, I don't think I have a large group of people. DZ, I don't think that is universally known by most parents. I think parents see their kids as a school project they have to deliver.
Yeah. I think we do a lot. I think we like, there's a lot that we can contribute. And at the same time, there are things I know that I had nothing to do with that my kids came into the world possessing. And, it's different for each of them. And that, look, it's certainly true for kids who have like disabilities, who require like more extensive interventions, and like require the parents to change their lives in order to kind of accommodate and raise their children properly. But even like leaving that aside, there is just so much that's already in there, and raising those kids is really hard and really complicated. There's a Jewish theologian named Mara Benjamin, who I'm a huge fan of. She has a book called The Obligated Self, which is kind of like a
Great title.
feminist Jewish theology. And like her notion of like, what is the obligated self? That's the parent, right? To become a parent is to kind of like, you know, be signing a blank check effectively to your kid, to whoever that kid may be. And you are responsible for adapting. You're responsible for adapting to whatever that kid requires. And that is in some ways a much weightier and much more extensive obligation than the like more straightforward do whatever your parents tell you obligation that kids need to follow. I find that a really helpful way of thinking about AI, actually, in that like we are also kind of like raising this thing that is huge and very powerful and growing, and we don't really know how it's going to be developing, but we have an obligation to it regardless. I can keep going on that front if that's helpful.
Give me a sec. So here's my issue with AI. Here's my issue with this line of questioning, and I know Marin's listening in. I actually think this bucket of questioning goes in tomorrow's episode about what is it that we are creating. Because I think this conversation is about, speaking of kids, is about our relationship with ourselves. Because if we're saying, DZ, you've alluded to this in some other conversations, and other people reference this, that the best kind of parents are the ones who know themselves the most, who can see when they're performing for the outside world, be it eyeliner or how they're filtering posts on Instagram or how they're bragging about their kids' swim scores. Like, the best kind of parents are the ones who know when they're playing the game and have the ability to stop playing it, to make sure that they're centering their own kids' blossoming and not trying to placate to some of their own insecurities or their parents' own insecurities. Technology makes that even more difficult because, as our previous guest, Dr. Tova Klein, mentioned, is that there is this tyranny of information. If your kid doesn't like blueberries, well, then cut them this way or mush them with carrots. Or, there's 100 different ways to try to get your kid to eat blueberries. And now we have AI that has the capacity to like diagnose our kid, tell us where we're doing wrong, which either in my case has helped expedite some of the outstanding questions I had around one of my kids' insecurities in raising their hand in school, or could entirely misdiagnose the situation or make us feel terrible as the people who are offering this blank check to our children. And by blank check, I assume you mean offering them their life. But I just wonder how we can root ourselves more in the ancient technology of asking each other for help on Shabbat. We'll use that as an example, or being more vulnerable with ourselves when it comes to raising our kids, or really relying on the village to help us do what we can't do 100% of the way. My mother has always been clear she could only raise me 47% of the way and relied on the rest of the world to do it. She was able to curate some other amazing women up until I was in like my early 20s to fill in the gaps that she couldn't. But then that at some point, she had to rely on me as being a constructive critic of the amount of information I was ingesting about who I was and how I was going to show up in the world.
Yeah.
I think that's the line that we need to hold in this episode, I think. And then save some of this other stuff of what kind of thing we're creating for the next one, which will still be a great post conversation to this one.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just say that it's something I struggle with myself as someone who is a parent, but is not a parenting expert. That it is tough to follow the line of um, trying to make sure that your kid is engaged in all the things they want to be engaged in, and has access to technology, and that you're not so restrictive, and and at the same time you're making the right interventions in the right moments, so that they are protected from the things that you think are dangerous or are not worth the potential risks. It's really, really hard to find that balance. I don't know that I found that balance. I don't know that the parents around me have found that balance. I think there is instead a kind of general anxiety that I see around parents around, did I make the right choice? Am I going to regret this? In next year or in 5 years or 10 years, when this person grows up.
What guardrails are you putting up? What would guardrails for your children using AI look like?
So I am going to start with a pretty blunt place. After the experience, the kind of fiasco with social media, with exposing kids to phones at early ages, um, I would like to see pretty strong evidence that using AI at early ages is actually beneficial. Meaning, I don't think the burden of proof is on parents to say this is a dangerous technology, and maybe we shouldn't use it. I think the burden of proof is on the AI companies to say using this technology at early ages is actually going to help your kids. And I don't know that that case has really been made.
Is anyone even trying to make it?
I think there is a general sense, and especially in American society, that technology is good and that accepting technology is good. And there is a concern about the job market, and a concern that if you are not sufficiently experienced at a given technology, that you're not going to be equipped for the future. But there is also kind of growing backlash. Right? If you are kind of reading the temperature of students on college campuses, there's so much resentment about the use of AI, and the way that universities have like put AI in every informational packet, and it shows up everywhere in the university, out of a sense of like, this is what we have to do to be the university of the future, and not necessarily because it is beneficial for students or makes their education better. I think that is true to an even greater extent when you're talking about kids who are 6, 8, 15. I think you would actually have to show that these things are beneficial, and I think there's a really good reason to say that they can be harmful. Um, one of the ways that one one of the ways that I like to think about this that I find helpful is, you may have had the experience of interacting with AI on a question about which you are competent, and then interacting with AI about a question for which you have no freaking idea what the right answer is, right? It's nice to use AI when you're competent, right? You feel like you're getting a little bit of boost. And then when you use AI for something that you don't know the answer to yourself, I mean, maybe it's giving you the right answer, but it's really just a gamble, right? It's anyone's guess. Um, and it's easy to go from one category to the other, right? There's all kinds of physicists today who get these emails from people who are like, listen, I solved physics. I was talking to Claude for like 2 hours and I solved physics. Because you don't realize they're moving from territory that they understand to territory that they don't understand.
Oh, I would really enjoy talking to a physicist who received an email like that. And like, I mean, I don't know, maybe DZ, maybe what you and I should do is put into, I don't know, you tell me which AI agent we should use, and just say, how do we solve parenting? Like, and then distribute that to like other parenting experts. I guess.
Maybe, but wait, let me get to the point.
Oh,
Let me
sorry,
get to the
sorry,
point.
sorry.
So one of the areas where we believe ourselves to be competent is the self. We think we are competent about our own selves, what we're like, what works for us, what doesn't work for us. And that's true to a degree, right? It's important to understand yourself. It's important to understand that you understand yourself, but nobody has a perfect competence in themselves. And when you interact with an AI, especially for kind of more personal issues, if you're using AI as a therapist, if you're using AI as a romantic partner, it is easy to move from this is me understanding myself using AI based on that to actually there are pieces of myself that I don't really understand. And the AI, because it is just mirroring me, is masking the fact that I don't understand myself well. And that's true for adults. Now imagine what that's like for kids. Imagine what it's like to gain a sense of self when your sense of self is still rapidly developing in the presence of AI. Like what is it like to gain a sense of yourself in front of a mirror at all times? I think that is incredibly dangerous. Right? I think it avoids this necessary friction that we need with other people to understand who we are and what we're about and what works for us and where we struggle. Um, so I have a lot of trepidation around using AI with kids at all, and I kind of want to start with like a position of before you make the argument of here are the situations where you shouldn't use AI for kids, like make the case for me that actually using AI when you're 8 years old serves some real function. I'd like to see someone make that case. I don't think I've seen it directly. I think it's just made implicitly through, the culture of American society and its fascination with technology. So I'm a relative hardliner on this, um, and in part out of a frustration with the kind of, you know, like the steamroller of like, let's go on to the next technology, the next technology, the next technology, and here it feels like a place of like, no, like when it comes to my kids, you tell me why it is worth my time to spend. It is worth their time to spend with this technology. What benefit is going to give them? How is it going to help them?
DZ, does Judaism care more about what a child knows or what kind of person a child is becoming?
Hmm. I think it's a good question. I would say that the two are supposedly interlinked, right? Part of the reason that it makes sense to study Torah, that it makes sense to study Jewish text, the reason that that is emphasized is out of a sense that that will improve your character. And I think that happens like in a few ways. First of all, like there's actually messages there that are valuable. But at the same time, there's something in like the process of studying that can be helpful in like developing a person's character, like that can socialize them. So I don't know that the two are entirely disconnected. I will like say that there is within Judaism a gendered component to this because not all Jewish communities understand men and women and boys and girls as having the same obligation to study Torah. But taking like a kind of egalitarian frame for this,
Yes.
you can say that there's a sense in which studying Torah is important for building your character, right? It helps you develop who you are. And I definitely feel that in terms of like the Torah that I study with my kids, right? There are things that we study together where the actual like technical knowledge that is being transmitted is pretty uninspiring, right? It's about like, the technical details of like how you set up like a certain boundary around a community in a particular circumstance. Like this is not inspiring stuff. But the process of learning it, is supposed to be the thing that inspires. The process of spending time with another person, the process of trying to decipher something together. That's what's supposed to be inspiring.
So if AI can answer almost any question, what happens to the Jewish value of wrestling with the question, which, as we alluded to earlier in the season, seems to be the foundation of arguably the Jewish identity?
Yeah, I don't remember if I used this analogy before, but in some ways, Jewish learning functions a little bit more like skiing or snowboarding, in the sense that like what you are doing is not like trying to download all the information about skiing or snowboarding well into your head. Like the point is to actually do the activity, right? The actual practice of being with another person, studying a text together, like that is the goal in and of itself. And skills can help you with that, right? Like, if you're studying in Hebrew, then knowing Hebrew is a useful skill to get you to that point where you can have that experience together. Um, in the same way that learning how to snowboard, learning how to ski is useful in order for you to enjoy skiing or snowboarding. Um, but the point of it is the experience. In that way, Jewish learning is a little bit different from other forms of knowledge acquisition, right? I don't learn math just for like the love of learning math. I mean, some people do. There's a few people who do love learning math, but like the point of it is to like know math. The point of it is to know English or whatever other subject it is. Jewish learning doesn't really function like that. A lot of Jewish learning is for the experience of doing learning itself, and that is reflected in the materials themselves, which are not always like super inspirational on their face. People who like start doing Jewish learning often encounter this problem of like, I'm trying to figure out like what is the book in this canon of texts that is most inspiring to me, and like there often isn't an obvious choice. Because the subject matter of the books is not really the point. The point is like the experience of studying those books together. And in that process, then you get to kind of, a more interesting and more helpful place.
This might be really nuanced, but then what does it mean to raise children who can live with mystery? Like, as you were using the example that you're teaching your children about the rules of the kind of borders that can be built around a specific kind of community, that feels very carved in stone, passed down from, over the course of a couple thousand years. But like, then how do you insert mystery into the process, which is what Atiba and Tova were referencing throughout this conversation, that it has to be, you have to maintain the wonder. Because that's where curiosity gets to grow and thrive. And that's where your kids will have an entertaining life for the rest of their lives. Because, what's happening on the other side of the world to palm trees, or, what's happening downstairs to the ant colonies.
Yeah. One of the funny things about Jewish learning is sometimes you're learning it and like you're trying to like just understand what is the text saying, but a lot of the time you're actually trying to fight the text. Like you're trying to find holes in it. You're trying to find problems with it. And if you're not doing that directly, you're reading commentaries who have already found holes and problems with the text. Meaning there's something very combative about it. And that process kind of like, it snowballs like over hundreds of years. And often the process of Jewish learning in sophisticated environments is a process of people who are fighting each other, often quite bitterly, about the meaning of particular texts. And part of what it means to be doing the learning effectively, I think, is to give people permission to feel like you're allowed to fight in this too. Like you're allowed to have a voice in this too. So it's not like, get the information, but then stay silent. But it's actually like, no, like you have a voice too. So in terms of the mystery, there's mysteries everywhere, right? There's like words we don't understand. There's like sentiments that we don't understand. And like, the point is never to suppress that and be like, well, that's what the text says, so I guess that's the end of the story. But instead to be like, what in the world is going on here? Like I'll, to pick an example, right? One of the first things I learned with my kids is the book of Samuel, which is a part of the Hebrew Bible that focuses on the story of the King Saul and King David, and then the kings after them. So like the first few kings of Israel. It's good material for kids because it is full of violence. Kids love violence. And also has like good character development. Like they're people who like you understand well enough to relate to them and like to have feelings about them. Like it would make, it's probably made into a TV show. Like it would make for good TV. There is a story in the book of Samuel about King David, where he sees a woman who is bathing on a roof and basically, takes her, seems like rapes her, and then she is married and sends her husband off to be killed on the front lines of a war. So like, what does it mean to learn this story with a 5-year-old, with a 6-year-old, with a 7-year-old?
Sorry, DZ, are you teaching a 5-year-old the story?
So I teach my kid the entire book. Wow. And like, there's like some, like softening, I would say, that happens around like, certain aspects that are appropriate and inappropriate. But what doesn't get hidden is this is a story that is really troubling. Like this is a king who is doing something that is incredibly inappropriate, that is using their power to harm the people who are their subjects. Now, the story itself then goes on to criticize David, and like there's a whole sad aftermath as a result. But even before we get to that point, like part of what I want them to get in reading this story is like, don't just assume that because you read this in a book that like we've stamped as being holy, that everything in it is about people who are doing things that are good and right. In fact, there's many, many stories in these books that are quite troubling. And part of what it means to read them and to contribute to that conversation is to say like, yeah, that's really troubling. Because if you don't say that, then like you're just a reader. You're not a writer. you're not contributing to the conversation in a way that allows you to add to it. All you can do is just say, I'm gonna walk away from this because I don't like what I'm hearing. Um, so I don't see an alternative. You kind of like have to go in that direction. Um, and I find that helpful for them in like being able to trust their own instincts to say like, there's something wrong here. There's something that I don't like, and there's something that I wanna fix.
So where I really want to go with that part of the conversation is like, well, then, because this is my fundamental problem with so many of our religious texts is that they are domination based, that the org chart is men over women, period, full stop, which brings me to like slamming on the brakes about the entire collection of Abrahamic work, recognizing that I still cherry pick plenty of things from it, as I do from so many other faiths, poems, songs. I mean, obviously, I know the story of King David and Samuel have to do with were the genesis for writing the song Hallelujah, which I think I listened to today. Um, but there's a part of me that maybe I'm lazy in how I am introducing some of these ancient technologies to my kids, because we're not holding the microscope over these stories. We're holding the microscope over what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. We're holding the microscope over who gets to vote when, where, and how in this country. Like, we're looking at today's headlines and being like, you, and saying to them, you tell me what feels unethical, and you tell me where your responsibility is to make change. I'm hearing you say that you use ancient stories, and I'm assuming all of my Jewish ancestors who also read that story to their children also said, you tell me what's fucked up about that. Again, maybe not that way, but I probably would be that cross with my kids. But is that the technology? Is that how you use the technology of that story? And why do you use that story and not our current headlines?
Oh, I also use the current headlines.
Okay, fine.
But
Then
and
I am the lazy Jew,
but
DC.
I would say like I would say not every Jewish parent who is teaching their kids these stories is reading it that way. There is a school of thought that says, especially for the Hebrew Bible, it's important to recognize that all of these characters are, I mean, they wouldn't use the word saints, but like are are fundamentally good, and their actions are good, and they're motivated in good ways, and will go to great lengths to justify the things that that happen in these stories. Uh, I I simply can't read that way. And so that's not how I read with my kids. But even that aside, within like the culture of Talmud study, which I would say that is the thing that takes up the bulk of Jewish learning, especially kind of like from middle school and higher within Orthodox context, it is all about like, critique and discern and understand like what is not working here. How do you solve apparent problems in the text? Like that's what it's all about. So you kind of like learn that skill, and I think it's a helpful skill to learn. It's not the only way to learn. It's not the only way to learn it, but I think it's um, yeah. I see the kids respond to it. I'll say, and the fact that kids respond to it tells me that like it's doing something that they find valuable. Kids like to be judges, right? They like to understand situations and like to kind of like give their input. And so kind of like giving them the ability to kind of like to shape their impulses around text, I find helpful. In some ways, like the headlines are, well, I'll pause there.
Well, I actually am going to pause us because we have 5 people on Twitch. I don't know who those people are. You, me, Marin. I know Jay was watching at some point. I think my dad jumped in. I can't confirm who the other people are. I do want to push you, or not push you, but I do want the conversation. I want to pose the following question, and you can decide if you want to answer it and how you want to go with the conversation. That if you are using these stories as tools to identify injustices and draw clear boundaries, and that's what's always been used. Do you think those tools have been sharp enough if there's so many injustices in the world, particularly injustices being particularly injustices, hold on, you know where I'm going with this, but one sec. Particularly injustices being done in our name?
Yeah. It's a difficult question. It's a question that keeps me up at night. Right? Like, it keeps me up at night that, a lot of the time is when I see people who, like, wear my particular head covering, in the news, it's not for doing the best things. They're sometimes doing pretty horrific things. Um, you know, like, I am acutely aware of the people who went through the same educational programs as I did, the same kinds of educational programs as I went through, and ended up doing pretty terrible things. So, there's definitely something else going on. That's as best as I can understand it, that there's something that corrupts whatever messages are being taught, or the messages aren't being taught well enough. Um, I don't know that I have a better answer for that, but it bothers me.
Do you think that there's a way to lean on some of these stories? Now, I definitively did not think you were going to say, I'm talking to my daughter about rape and rape. Um, as a way to say injustice exists in the world, it's our responsibility to step up to that line and stop it. Do you think that the technology that we've inherited, or the way that you've inherited it, I guess I would say, because my relationship with ancient text and how I bring it into my kids' world is very much like I'm just relying on headlines and I do Shabbat when it's convenient for me. Do you think that technology is good enough then? Because there isn't safety for everybody in the world.
I don't know that there's any technology that can ensure that a person is a good person. Right? I don't think there is anything within Judaism or any other tradition that can ensure that people act well in the world. Um, and in particular, I think community really matters. I think personal life experience really matters. I think ability to be empathetic, to understand other voices, other opinions really matters. And those things can be tied into text and can be reinforced by text, but are not necessarily. And it's entirely possible to use these texts, to use many texts from the Jewish tradition and twist them in ways that
Mhm.
I find personally pretty abhorrent. Um, yeah, I don't know that there's a way around that. I mean, that's part of what happens when the texts are freely interpretable by anybody who wants to interpret them. That can be turned in all kinds of awful directions.
I'm going to give you a quick layup as our final question, and then you, Martin, and I are going to process this conversation and figure out exactly where it fits, if it fits. I think it's an important one. I think it's a really critical one. And DZ, I'm really grateful that you went here today in this kind of way. I think it's an interesting and urgent way to consider it. I just don't know exactly where it would fit. Here's the final layup. So, is Shabbat a kind of parenting technology in an always on world?
Um, everything's a technology if we want them to be technologies. Yeah, as a historian, as someone who's taught the history of the word technology,
Yeah.
Shabbat, sure, Shabbat can be a technology, but I will say that Shabbat has meant something especially important in the last couple hundred years. It used to be that we lived in a world where um, it was clear when people had to stop working, like when the sun went down, or when it was a different season for growing crops. Um, and we now live in a world where work never needs to stop. Never ever, right? Like nothing really needs to stop. The only stops that we have are the ones that we put in place ourselves. And so kind of teaching kids from an early age, like we have the power to create our own boundaries around technologies, whether it's through Shabbat or through some other means, I think is really, really crucial to understanding that you have agency here.
You know what? I'm not going to do the conclusion now. I want to figure out what this specific episode is saying. I asked Martin if she wanted to jump in, but I haven't seen her jump in. Okay, DZ, thank you. Holy shit, that was an intense one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't talk about this stuff as much, in part because, like, I think, as I've said before, one of the it's so easy to get sucked into that. Like, so much of, like, the total intellectual energy of the Jewish people is dedicated to questions around Israel and Zionism and anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, and things like that. And like a
But
lot.
sorry, isn't that just today?
What do you
Like,
mean?
that's just been the past, like, 100 years, though.
What has been?
That so much of our questioning
Oh
has
yeah,
been right,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. No, I mean, that's what happens when you have a people that is constantly attacked. Like, like it is part of the fabric of our people. Like, it is like we are constantly worried about our own destruction, and that has, like, I'm not going to say this well, but like, we have been in that state for a long time. We've been in that state for a long time, and the conversation around Israel also has, like, taken up huge amounts of energy. So, like, look, my place in this is in some ways to be outside of it, because if I'm inside of it, like, there's
It
nothing else.
Well, right, and you can't actually do the other kind of work that you think is, like, long-term sustainable as, like, not as, but critically important too. We, DZ, haven't I'm gonna end the stream. Let me just see if that means you guys disappear.